everyone. My name is Enikő Nőthig-Hegedüs. I'm co-founder and CEO at Educate. At Educate, we have an excellent team. We're driving basically the largest agile transformations in Budapest right now. We do innovation, capability building, mindset shift, and things like that. What I'm going to talk about today is how design thinking and agile are basically shaping the ways how product strategies are made and implemented in today's world. So what I'm going to talk about is less the tactical part, like graphic design or UX design. It's more of how product and strategy comes into the picture, because what I see in real life is that the immense value of design thinking comes out when we basically do business strategy formulation. And that's why I would suggest to anyone to focus it on that area. So what is strategy at all? Strategy is about trade-offs. You cannot be everything at the same time. You gotta make choices. You have a lot of options. You cannot be cheap and high quality and fast and everything. You have to make a lot of choices in there. So even when you're trying to prioritize, this is just a quick example. So if you want to prioritize what features you want to bring to the users, you cannot do everything at the same time. You have to make some trade-offs all the way along. So I'm saying the strategy is more of a hypothesis that you have, but maybe better put, we say that it's a constantly refined and working hypothesis, because it's not like in the old days when the people sit down in the boardroom, they formulate a strategy, and then they clap their hands and say, OK, we are done, this is our strategy. It's more of an evolving, continuously improving thing that we are talking about, and that's why I'm saying it's more like a hypothesis that you have, that you keep on working on constantly, and you cannot really complete it at any time. Who knows what M-Pesa means? Hopefully everybody. OK. You talked about it in the morning. OK, great. I brought this example because I've spent the summer in Kenya, so that's why the personal thing, but let's hear how you guys know it. So this is a mobile banking solution, basically. You don't need a bank account for it. You don't need internet connection. It works without that. And that's why M-Pesa said that their strategy, their core competence is going to be the leading mobile banking service in the developing areas. What they did is a bunch of traditional analysis to find which companies to go to. So here we have Vodacom, who acquired M-Pesa. They said they want to go global with it. They want to acquire the whole developing countries area. They entered India. Did you guys hear about it? How did it work? Working fine in India. How about Romania? Don't know? OK. They entered a bunch of countries. And the interesting thing is that if you take a look at, for example, the traditional management consulting way of finding out what the best country would be, all these countries would be a great option. But the thing is that if you take a look at how people actually react and how they, so for example, what are the drivers in their decision making? What is the criteria when deciding your personal finances? It's a whole lot of different story for each and every country and society, and you cannot really generalize in that sense. And that's why combining both the traditional ways and the design thinking, the innovative ways for formulating the strategy works best, in my opinion. So I brought you here two frameworks just to bring them together, because what I see with many of the clients nowadays is that they think these more like competing methodologies, pushed next to each other. So if you look at the left, it's like the Management Consulting 101, the 3 Cs, company, competitors, and the customer. That's what we are talking about. On the right side, you see one framework from design thinking: desirability, viability, and feasibility. These frameworks basically go for a very similar aspect, to put it honestly. And that's what I'm saying. But they have different toolkits. So they're trying to help you capture basically the similar dynamics or dimensions. What we are doing here is that we use different toolkits. So for example, when you talk about who are the customers, you have a bunch of market analysis tools to see what is the market size, what is the target rate, things like that. But if you apply the design thinking methodologies, you will see a lot more depth in the whys. So it's not just the what, but a lot about the whys. And that's what you want to understand. I brought you another example here, which is one of our previous projects, where we solved the challenge, how might we make the internal capability building, so the training program basically more effective within a large company. And what we realized is that finding out what are the desirable features of a training for the people, for example, what are the things that make people skip a training or join a training or things like that. Beyond that, it's also important to know for example, what are the capabilities of the company? Whether do we have the right trainers on board or not? And this is the feasibility part. And if we have a solution that takes 3 weeks to implement for a team of 10 people inside the HR team, and the effectiveness improvement is like 5%, is it worth it or not? We would say not really, because that was not really a huge change. It's just an incremental improvement, and it's not going to be worth it. So if any of these aspects is missing from your solution, your hypothesis, it's not going to work out. Peter Thiel, he's not such a big fan of lean startup. He says, use the traditional ways to do your analysis and combine it with the lean startup and design thinking and all these things. Because sit down, do your homework, do your customer research and your competitor research, know what is the willingness to pay and all these things, because these things you can just figure out very easily. But then go out on the street and talk to the customers and prototype with them and do all those things. So try to combine these methodologies. One point. Even when you make the strategies, don't commit the mistake that you don't test it out. What I see with many people is that they come up with strategies and then they go ahead and just implement it. And it's not the right way. Why is that so? Mike Tyson tells you why. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. No matter how big of an expert you are in your field and how great your plan is, you cannot plan for everything. And in today's world, life is going to bring you so weird situations that you cannot really prepare for. So the best thing you can do is that you bring a plan and then you keep it adaptive, really. That's why I prefer this mindset a bit better. Plans are worthless, but planning is everything. Why is that so? The effort that you put into the preparation is what will make you be capable of answering all those questions that will come up along the way. And that's what you really want. So don't get stuck with the plan that you have. Keep it really adaptive and adapt to the situations. One more thing you can do, not to just drive in the dark, let's say, is to keep it really iterative. If you keep it close to the people, you get a lot of feedback, and you keep it really adaptive in that sense as well. You're not driving in the dark anymore, so you're overcoming a lot of issues. Okay, even if you're Disney and you're talking about acquiring Lucasfilm, which is a huge merger and acquisition question, it's a lot about strategy. So even in that sense, it's important to test the hypothesis that you have and figure out, for example, what are the things that the people will be responsive for, what will be appealing to them and what not. And then you can figure out what is the depth in there and how to go forward, whether it's a good idea or not. Okay, so let's focus more on the product part right now. Probably you guys are familiar with this concept, this outside-in innovation, when you do incubate startups and then bring them on board. That's what many companies do in Hungary as well. What I've seen in practice where they miss a bit about this is that they don't allow the startups to grow the same way that they did while they were outside the company. So they slow them down. That's why you see the ships in there. So the speed of the whole innovation of the company is going to be defined by the slowest elements in that sense. So don't commit this mistake that you slow down the companies. Try to understand the way they work and try to adapt as much as possible. Okay, probably you heard the story, I read it in the papers. It was like a couple months ago when they wrote about it. There was an office building somewhere in the US where people were complaining that the elevators are too slow. And the owner had no idea what to do about it. He had only one idea, to ask a fee quotation from a reconstruction company. He looked at the bill and said, no, we are not going to pay this, so we got to find an alternative solution. And they had some friends at an innovation consulting company. And they hired this company. These guys came on board, and they spent almost a week just trying to understand how the people interact with those elevators. So whether they wait alone or with someone else, whether they use it just upwards or they use it both ways. What do they do inside the elevator? What do they do while they are waiting? Things like that. And what they discovered is that the real problem is not that the elevator is slow, but that the people are bored while they are waiting for the elevator. So if you look at that from a different angle, it's a totally different solution space. In order to make the people entertained, what can we do? What are the solutions to do that? Yeah, actually that's what they did. In many companies, the alternative is to put out advertisements, TV screens with some information, things like that. What they actually did in this story is that they put out mirrors. Because there is a study that people get entertained by looking at their own reflections in the mirror for more than 30 seconds. Just remember the last time you were in an elevator alone. Oh, my necklace is not the right size, or, like something in my teeth. We do that, and we get entertained. And this is how people behave. And since they implemented all those mirrors, then no one really complained after that. The human way. So what I wanted to point out here is that this team almost walked by a huge opportunity to reduce the implementation time and the cost. Just think about the whole reconstruction of the elevator system compared to putting out a couple of mirrors. There was a huge saving in there, and they almost missed it. And what I see many times is that people just jump to the implementation part. Have you heard anyone say, hey, I have a great idea. People would love it. Let's implement it. Let's do a plan for 6 months, and let's try to implement it. And they just go ahead and start here. And they don't do all the discovery, exploration, empathizing, and testing part. They miss all of that. And there is a huge opportunity in there. You leave so many things on the table if you miss that. This is another graph which shows collecting a couple of problems until we have a post-release analytics. So end-to-end a product development journey, let's say. The first part is where actually design thinking comes into the picture, when you want to know what are how to build the right things. You want to know what are the problems that you want to solve and see what is the underlying need so that your solutions that you're designing are going to fit those problems. And then the other part is, so far you go here, you have a lot of ideas, you put them into the backlog, and that's where the two meet, basically. And from there, when you know already what are the right things to build, you know how to build them right. And that's where actually Agile comes into the picture, and Scrum and all the other methodology that applies to this part. Why is Agile more effective in this sense? If you look at these two graphs, the delivery value is a lot higher. You deliver earlier and you deliver often. The benefit is the cost of delay. You're saving the cost of delay because you're not delivering at the end of the whole project, but you're doing it incrementally. And that also relates to the risk elimination, because that's why we do the whole Agile thing. Everybody is crazy about Agile, but what the true value there is all the risk elimination in the system. And that's what you want to do. If you start with the riskiest assumptions, that would actually kill the idea. You want to know that as fast as you can, right? If there's something faulty about the product, you don't want to learn about it a year later. You want to know that as soon as possible. So you want to start with the riskiest things, so all the risk will go down. And while you go to the release part, the rollout of the whole project part, then you know that you are right, and you're not going to get punched in the face in that sense. OK, one more thing that we do in practice is dual track Agile. Who knows about dual track? OK, a couple of hands. OK, basically what it means is that we don't just do plan, execute. It's more like we do a couple of, let's say, design sprints at the beginning, 4 or 5 maybe, to see what are the basic problems to solve. Once we kind of define them and refine them, we start the implementation sprint, so the Agile delivery sprints in the 2-weekly setup. But we don't stop in there, because there are some issues that we fall out from the delivery that cannot be solved within those sprints in, let's say, 1 or 2 spike stories. We loop back those things to the delivery track, the discovery track, And that's why it's like a parallel thing. And this is the approach that works, in my opinion, the best for large corporations as well, because things are so complex in a sense that you cannot really put things into those baskets and simplify things down. So that's why if you do it in this parallel way, it's a lot more effective. Okay, but how to succeed if there are so many limitations in the system? You have to submit clear business cases. There is annual budgeting. There are a lot of systems that keep it really interdependent within the company, and it's really hard to deliver in that sense. We had a project. This is just a mock-up that I made. I was an airline who wanted to set up an innovation hub. The idea was that they wanted to incubate a lot of startups, and they wanted to make it like there's the core company, and they are in an external organization, let's say, so that they are not really dependent on the company. But what they missed in this case is that the limitations of the company, the core company, were also applicable to the teams. So even if the innovation teams wanted to come up with something great, they had to go through the very same processes when it came to like financing or release or anything like that. So when the team wanted to test out one of a loyalty program ideas to see whether people are appealed to, let's say, the payback more or the point collection or what is the best to them, they wanted to get one of these tiny boxes on the website to see whether people will sign up. But they had to submit a huge, detailed business case to do that. Things like, I don't know, the customer target base and what is the conversion rate and all those kind of things, like revenue targets. They had no idea about these things at all, but they had to submit it. And still, they ended up like not starting this whole thing. They had just a couple of hypotheses in their heads. They did not test them. So the whole project really just fell apart. And because of there was this huge miscommunication within the company. In order for such mindsets to work, basically, the whole company had to shift gears. And that's where the mindset change comes into the picture. If the company did not expect these startups to follow their regulations and compliance systems and all those things, then they could have delivered a lot faster. And this links back to the cultural part. What I see in Budapest especially is that people get obsessed with tools and processes within Agile and within design thinking. And they don't talk about being a culture, being a mindset, because that is what's really going to drive the value to all the teams. And they are missing out on that part a lot. And of course, there are a lot of methodologies inside this which help us deliver better, and also that we love these methodologies. They are the things that will really, really help us acquire the mindset that we want. Let's say we have a product owner who has to be customer-centric. I tell him, he's a total new starter. I tell him, please be customer-centric. Is he going to know what to do the next day? Not really. Maybe he will say so, but honestly, he has no clue how to do that. So, but if I tell him, hey, let's collect a couple of personas who we would interview. Here are some questions, how to write the questions for the interview. Here is a framework, how to capture your insights. Tomorrow we will sit down, we will synthesize, we will do You show him a lot of things. This way, he's going to learn a lot of tools, but by the end, he will also acquire the mindset. He will know that the product doesn't have to be perfect, for example. He has to just acquire this trial and error mindset, for example. And this way, he's going to get there. So how to scale up the innovation and agile culture in the organizations? If you want to shift the mindset of the people, you have to start with transforming the whole organization. And in order to do that, it's the best if you start with the capability building of the people. If they don't know what is the expectation from them, they have no idea where to go to. So what I'm saying is that instead of only working with consultants for a certain project for a certain time, it's best if you give the people the internal capabilities. How we do this usually is that we like to start with introducing Scrum or Kanban to a couple of teams. We usually pick 1 or 2 products that are not so dependent on the others within the large company. It means usually like 2 to 5 teams. They start the delivery in the Scrum way, and we gather a lot of insights. And during that time, we do a lot of organizational design, figuring out how, if we rolled it out in the huge company, how would that look, basically. So what are the roles? How do we manage the dependencies between the teams? What is the roadmap for the products? Things like that. And this is a complex plan. And once we have this, and also we use the scaled methodologies like SAFe or LESS, or also what we call the Spotify, but it's not actually a Spotify model. But we use them, and they kind of inspire all these things, and we link it back together with all the things that we collected from that specific company. And based on that, we know how to roll it out on a larger scale. So this is how we do like larger waves, like 500 people in one run. And we do a couple more of that. And once people get confident with this, it takes more than a year or even 2-3 years to be really confident in doing the Agile delivery way. Then we start in the meanwhile introducing design thinking capabilities for the teams. It means we pick 1 or 2 of the key challenges that they are facing, and we do a couple design sprints. So we have a lot of learnings from there as well. And then once we have that, and we have the buy-in of the people, they know why to do it and how to do it, then we come up with a more structured way, basically. So for example, whether we should time these design sprints to be aligned with the quarterly plannings, or whether do it in a dual-track Agile way, or how shall we do that? And in the meanwhile, we also mentor like the internal Agile coaches and product owners and everyone on the team, so that they are the ones who are going to run the future sprints. And they know how to do that, basically. And it's like their hands are tied when the consultants go home at the end of the day. So that's the main point. And where you want to end up is this, the innovative and agile mindset of the people, the internal people. Okay, and at the very last, a couple of pitfalls that you can avoid if you follow the above discussed things. The first thing is the decision making. Who knows what HIPPO is? Close enough? No. It's the highest paid person opinion, the HIPPO, who can ruin the game in the boardroom. Because what you want to do is to have data-driven decisions. If you do the homework right, if you do your customer research, user research, if you use analytics, and you not just inspect, but you also adapt and feedback all those things that are your insights, that is going to give you all the value. And then you don't have to worry about someone really driving in a non-data way. Another thing is, new is always better. When we introduce design thinking capabilities in a team, for example, there's always going to be a rest of a company who have no idea about it, who are not communicated with, and they have a lot of concerns. So what we do is that we proactively plan the interactions with the non-agile and non-innovative part of the company as well, because they have huge expertise, and we want to leverage that as well. And we want to bring those two together somehow, so that the agile teams and the non-agile teams can work together, and there are like no fractions between those people. Another thing is the alignment. If you remember the airline case, where their hands were basically tied because of the company's financing and release-related business case-based decision-making, they had this huge misalignment. What we want to do is that there are no unnecessary pressure on the people, basically, when they don't have to make any commitments or decisions that they don't know what to base on, basically, and that's where you want to get to. And at last, the culture. There is a huge hype about Spotify, and everybody is trying to copy Spotify for their innovative culture. What is interesting is that, two things. One is that they don't really differentiate between using design thinking or whether to call it service design, or are the two the same. They don't talk about whether it's SAFe or whether it's Scrum or which kind of methodologies. They just say it's an innovative culture where we are customer-centric, where we try to be really adaptive, and so on and so on. So they base it on the values. They have 3 tribe leads, basically. They have a product, a tech, and they also have a design lead, because customer centricity is so important to the company that it's reflected on their reporting lines as well. But even though that, their VP of growth still says that the reporting lines has nothing to do about the change. What is really going to drive the change in the long run is the culture of the people. And in order to get there, what you want to do is that people are really capable of all those mindsets that are necessary to be innovative. And the very last note is that, considering the human aspect, What I see in practice is that many people take these kind of changes as a process or a project to manage, and they miss out on the human aspect of that. But if you pay close attention to people, their individual and team settings, and how they are going to be handled basically in the new system, and what their roles are going to be, is going to pay off in the long run. So paying attention to the people is really, really important. So we're saying that whatever kind of change you're doing, make it in a human-centered way as well. Yeah, thank you.